steering wheel. Somebody tell him to give it to me.
There's something loose between my legs.
I don't know. Let go!
I'm heavier than a freaking boat.
Nothing you could say could make that any better.
Yeah, nobody. No more radio for the rest of the race.
I'm going home. You.
Hello and welcome to DRSFC, an F1 podcast by soccer nerds. This is a 2024 season recap. So whether you're just getting into F1 or you need a refresher after a second 3-week break for some reason, or if you just have a goldfish memory, which, you know, no shade if you do, we got you. I'm Andre Carlisle, and to help me recap the season so far is Deepti Ajampour. Deepti, hello.
Howdy.
And, howdy. Okay, thank you.
And
Kyle Carr. Kyle, how are you?
I'm good. I feel like the howdy's a good fitting thing considering we got a race in Texas coming up. So.
Exactly.
Yeah, I was like, okay, on brand. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So what we're going to do is just walk you through what happened up until this point in the season. Kind of give you some things to look for in the last 6 races, because that's all we have left, y'all. It's just 6 races left in this season. And then we'll be looking forward to 2025. And then 2026 when all the regulations change, but we'll have episodes out dealing with all of that. So we're going to stick to 2024. And all right, Kyle, do you just going to want to get us through the boring part maybe? The first part of the season was a whole lot of Max Verstappen.
It was, I'm not going to say a fun start. We thought, all right, after Max's dominant 2023, where he won the majority of the races, and Red Bull won all but one race. Basically, we were going into 2024, and it started off that same way. We're like, oh no, this is not going to be great. Max Verstappen won pretty much every single race, besides 2. One of them was because he DNF'd, but he also got pole in those first 7 races. So you're thinking, all right, guess we're doing that. Hooray, I suppose. But yeah, definitely a dominant performance early on. But as we saw, things don't stay the same.
That is very true. And thankfully, they didn't stay the same. But that one other race that you talked about, I feel like we do need to talk about Australia because, yes, Maxie, it almost was one of those things that showed you how exciting things could be if Max was a non-factor. Like how much fun the races could be if Max just wasn't there, because his DNF allowed us to have a really great Grand Prix where we didn't really know what was going to happen. And then we had the storyline of Carlos Sainz, who developed appendicitis, a couple weeks before this race, had to have it removed. And then he recovered in time to he missed one race, but he recovered in time to get in the car for this one and then won the damn thing. Mm-hmm. Thought that was wild.
Also wild in that race, Logan Sargent couldn't race because Williams only had one. I forgot what part it was, but they only had one of those. So, and Alex Albon crashed. It was a chassis.
Yeah, one chassis.
Because they didn't have a spare, he basically had to take Logan Sargent's car. Probably some foreshadowing. We should have saw this coming for Logan Sargent's season.
If you'll remember from our rookie season episode, when I talked about the chassis, I was like, note to teams, always bring an extra. And this was why.
Yeah, you casually dropped an if you know, you know, and this was the if you know.
Exactly.
One thing I do want to give Carlos a shout out about, because honestly, we know F1 and the money in the sport, and we know it can certainly be a bubble of just wealth and all of the finest things and all of that. It is a prestigious sport. Feels very gatekeepy, right? In terms of your ability to access and all of that. And certainly the drivers get paid a ton of money and are used to having the best of everything. And this kind of quote from an ESPN article about his ordeal and being able to come back showed a bit of awareness on his part that I wouldn't necessarily, no disrespect, but it's something that I think most athletes don't necessarily think about. So Carlos said the reason why athletes recover faster is because you can dedicate 24 hours per day and 7 days to recovery. And that's exactly what I did. And then he started listing everything he did. I started going to hyperbaric chambers twice a day for 1 hour, taking an Indiva machine that is electromagnetic thing for the wounds. He said his programming, his time in his bed, his time to go for a walk, time to eat, the kind of food you have to eat to recover. Just everything is centered around recovery to try to be ready for Australia. And I just wanted to give him a shout out on that level of awareness of he was only able to do this because he leads a very privileged life.
Yeah, it's a good point. And privileged life, and just the athletes get the best standard of care, best starting from as soon as the injury happens, like the people who are at the races, like their medical team is top notch. Then they go to the best surgeons. They're able to whatever they need to get the athletes to recover quicker. So yeah, I agree with you, Andre. It's nice for them and him to acknowledge the privilege that he has and show that, yeah, it's not like honestly, it's only the 1% get to do this. Not everyone has the same means.
Yeah, it was also one of those where I know in the last episode you guys were talking about Papa Stroll throwing money around. I feel like this is exactly what you mean. It's like, all right, oh yeah, I just need to go and have this hyperbaric chamber. Sure, why not? I don't know how much that costs. I don't even know where you would find one of those. Penny change for them. Like, oh yeah, I just got to go to these machines and do these things. Like, yeah, Formula One really is just a sport for the rich.
Yeah, it truly is. And I just love when you get the level of awareness because it just helps with the relatability to a driver. Not that the average person or myself can relate to Carlos in many ways at all, but I think that was one where I appreciated his perspective. Okay, let's get back to the track a little bit because, as Kyle mentioned, that Miami race was the other race. That was Lando Norris's first win of the season. And that was impressive. And people point to Miami as being a turning point, but I'm going to push back on that a little bit. Because Max still won 3 of the next 4 races after Miami. Most of that or some of that was McLaren being weird. But I also think McLaren started showing how good they were the race prior to Miami, China. Lando came in second. And I thought that was interesting where you saw Lando second in the races before and after Miami. Australia, he was actually third. And Japan, he came in 5th. So you see McLaren building a little bit. And the Drivers' Championship opened up a little bit. And then what happened after those little bunch of races after Miami, Max just stopped winning. His last win was June 23rd, which is the Spanish Grand Prix, which is wild because it's October right now. And Max Verstappen has not won an F1 race in months. And I don't know when the last time was that we could say that.
Yeah, I don't know. I also want to point out that even though Max won several of those races and like McLaren wasn't winning after Miami until was it Hungary? I think Oscars, and we'll get to that.
Yeah.
But they did get P2 at, I think, every single race prior to Hungary, like between Miami and Hungary. So they were definitely like, they were there. There were several seconds between them and first for the most part, but they were always inching towards getting that P1.
Well, it was also interesting because we saw last year McLaren they started really poorly and then turned it around at the end of the year. And we thought, okay, this is going to be the year they figure it out. And it took them a while. It seemed like it was Max Verstappen winning, Ferrari getting a couple podiums. Even Checo was doing solid, but I don't know what caused that flip the switch. But since Miami and even China, I was like, all right, McLaren's basically been on the podium of, I think all but one race they've been on the podium, I believe, since then. Or I think ever since the Miami race, they've been on the podium.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of growing pains for McLaren in that as well, because I don't know if their development happened faster or was much better than they even anticipated, because they had some weird moments, right? Like you're looking at Red Bull started hitting, like it's almost like that, the graph where one is trending down, the other one's trending up, and Red Bull was trending down, McLaren was trending up. But McLaren couldn't, even with what was becoming pretty clear to be a better car and then eventually the best car on the grid, which is what we believe McLaren had before these breaks that we went into. And even after the break, Lando comes back and wins Singapore, and we'll talk about all of that. But then McLaren is struggling to maximize the points that are available. So you have Lando on pole for Spain. As I mentioned before, Max Verstappen ends up winning the Spanish Grand Prix. Lando was on pole in Hungary. He lost out to Oscar, which we need to talk about their team radio because that was a whole random fiasco that birthed papaya rules, which is one of the silliest things that I've heard this season. Lando was on pole for the Dutch Grand Prix. He won that. He chased down Max after being passed in lap 1. And then he was on pole for Monza, but he lost out to Charles Leclerc Leclerc. He says, call him Leclerc. I'm going to call him Leclerc. Fine. But that was also because Oscar jumped him in the first lap as well. Pulled a really sweet move on him, but I also can't 100% say that Lando was anticipating that. And that may have been why it was so successful. And then in Singapore, he finally had pole. He finally led after the first lap, and he finally won the race. He finally got all those 3 things done. But think about all the points that were lost in the run that I just mentioned. So I don't know. Do y'all want to talk about the Hungary race now? Because I feel like it was frustrating, but it was also hilarious.
Yeah, you're talking about Miami being a turning point for the season as a whole. I think Hungary is a turning point for Team McLaren. I think Hungary is, like we said, Oscar ended up winning that one. Lando got P2, and then Lewis Hamilton was third on the podium. Oscar maybe shouldn't have won. Maybe Lando should have won. It got complicated towards the end. And Kyle, maybe you could say better about your thoughts on this. But yeah, Andre's talking about the radio call and that this race could have caused some rift between the drivers.
It was weird just because I don't know why it felt like one of those where the inexperience of McLaren being up there showed, because you would think if this was Red Bull, they would have just said, okay, Checo, give the spot to Max. If this was Ferrari, they probably would have let those two battle it out because we had seen that in the past. Or say with Mercedes, like it seemed like all these other teams had a better idea of like, okay, this is what's going to happen. While with McLaren, it was like their strategy screwed over Piastri. So then I was like, all right, let's try and give it back to him. But then you're trying to tell Lando, and then it's like this, like the awkward radios, like do the right thing. They're basically having to like beg him, and it seemed like almost hostage negotiation at one point. Eventually, Lando gave up the spot, but it was just one of those where I feel like this showed McLaren were not used to being in this kind of position while the other constructors were. And then we also saw it later on with Monza, where all of a sudden Lando's on the pole, but then Oscar just goes for it. And it's like papaya rules. And it's like, all right, sure, whatever that is. I think we're just making it up to try and cover ourselves. But it was just a weird, I feel like if Lando had done it right away, no one would have made a big deal. But because it took so long for Lando to give up the spot, it took so long for them to tell him to give up the spot, it felt bad because it overshadowed Piastri's win. And I mean, Piastri was driving really, really well at that point. So I don't know. It felt like inexperience was definitely showing in that situation.
Yeah, I have never experienced secondhand embarrassment watching a race, but I felt so embarrassed for McLaren, especially like the radio calls were just so cringy. They were basically like, think of the children, Lando, let Oscar by. And it was just like, what is happening right now within your team and these radio messages? And I agree with you, Kyle. And I think at the time I was like, all right, Lando, be strategic. Because really what ended up happening is an undercut happens, whenever a team kind of pits early or whatever, you get a little bit of an advantage. And that advantage that happened ended up because they were trying to cover off drivers behind them. And so the advantage in the pit strategy ended up putting Lando ahead of Oscar. And so they were like, because we made a strategic call, it's wrong for Oscar to now come in second, even though Lando really needs those points if he's going to chase down Max. And you could see that strategy decision put McLaren stuck into two kind of mindsets. Do we back our driver, who's closer to the Drivers' Championship, because we did not expect to be here? Or do we try to go for like team harmony and say like, whoops, we made a mistake that kind of swapped our drivers around. Let's try to make sure we correct that on the track. That's a weird way to do it, honestly. And what ended up happening was just a bunch of weirdness on the radio. I would definitely urge people to go and listen to I need to find a supercut of all of the radio calls begging Lando to do this, because one of them was like, you're going to need Oscar to win in the future. Mm-hmm. And then what does Oscar do 3 races later in Monza? Zipped right around him on the first lap. And I'm like, yo, what happened to needing Oscar? Like, it was so So I don't know if McLaren has all of that figured out, to be honest. Like, even now, I'm not 100% sure that we won't ever see Oscar jump Lando on another first lap.
Well, it was funny because this was the race, like they did the undercut because they thought Lewis Hamilton was going to gain on them, but then Max and Lewis crashed. So then I was kind of like, oh, well, we just screwed over Oscar because we thought we were going to be okay. And now this is bad timing as well.
Right. And it's just funny, like most teams, they have plan A, B, C. I don't know how far down the alphabet they go. But for this one, it just seemed like McLaren didn't even have a plan A. They got to one point and they were like, oh, shoot, what do we do now? And maybe each individual driver will have their plans, but I honestly don't think that they even still have a team plan moving forward with do we try to get Lando as many points as possible, or do we just let them battle it out and see where that takes us? I personally, coming to the end of the season where Lando is within 52 points, is it now, of Max, get him every point you can. Like, Oscar's still in his second season only, and I think he's a better driver, but I think what the team principals and whoever should have done is just say, like, okay, Oscar, like, next season you'll be P1 or driver 1, or we'll put you both on the same level and you guys can battle it out. But from here on out for this season, help Lando win. Because if Lando wins, like, the team wins too. Like, they're heading the constructors, they'll do better, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it'll probably go back down to Oscar getting more benefits as well. But it's just weird, the dynamic and what they've decided to do.
It felt like the Plankton meme where it's like, okay, what's your next plan? And then Plankton's just standing here like, I don't know. I didn't think I would get this far. That's exactly what it felt like for McLaren. It's like, all right, you're in this position. Now what? It's like, oh, we did not envision ourselves being in a situation this early.
Yeah, that's exactly what it felt like because, I think we've even seen teams like Mercedes when they had their beginning of their dominance with Lewis Hamilton and even Red Bull. You have to learn how to manage these situations. And I think McLaren definitely got here much more quickly than they thought they were. But I'm with you, Deepti. Like, this is a pure math thing. Like, Oscar, you have to understand math. Okay, like, this is basic math. Lando is much closer than you. There aren't that many races left. Because the one thing that's happened with Oscar is either he's taking points off of Lando or he's not taking points off of Max.
Yeah.
Like, you have to switch it up, buddy. Like, we really need you to be 1-2 and you need to be the 2 in between because we need those points. And right now, that's not what's happening. But I also will say, I think Lando in Hungary, in his brain was thinking, like, do I establish myself as a number 1 driver by refusing to move over for Oscar? Like, do I pull that right now and say, no, the team needs to focus on me? I think that's what caused him so much hesitation and not doing it quickly. And also just pure adrenaline and competitiveness. You're in the middle of a race. You're in the lead of a race. Going 200 miles per hour, things are great. The car is great. And yeah, you've got a lot going through your mind. But Kyle, I think you said this earlier. If he would have just let Oscar by, then you could have been like, okay, now we're racing now it's a race to the finish line. Like, now we get to battle. Now I've done my part. Team orders are no longer a thing. Let's see, one-on-one on the track. Maybe they crash into each other and that's a thing that McLaren wants to avoid. But at some point, like you said, next season, they're just going to have to let them battle it out.
And they made that decision to have Oscar move in front of Lando quite late in the race, right? It wasn't, they didn't have a lot of time to battle it out if he did let him pass. And Lando hesitating made it even less. But I don't blame him. I mean, if you guys were in his position, would you have given up the spot?
I feel like I would have, but I would not. I feel like that would have been I'll give up the spot, but we're talking about this after. Like, in the debrief, we're going to have a talk about it. Like, I'll do it, but I'm not happy about it kind of thing.
Yeah, I think I would have done the same thing. If I would have passed Oscar on track, then I'd be like, absolutely not. But since it was a strategy call, I was like, I get it. Like, I got here because of calls made by the team. So I would have given it back to him, but then I would have went after him. Like, okay, now let's race and see. Like, now it's a sprint race. Let's see who gets to the finish line.
Fair.
Okay, so actually, you know what, Deepti, thanks for the question, but what would you do?
In my head, I would have liked to say that I would have just asserted dominance and kept going, but no, I would also have taken team orders and hoped that we would be on the same page moving forward, which it doesn't seem like they're there yet, but that would have been my thinking.
Yeah, we would have definitely had to have a conversation about all those radio messages because at the very least, they're embarrassing. Like, let's not do that again.
I want to imagine the other drivers going back and listening to those because they're in the zone when they're racing, but that just afterwards, they're in their group chat probably talking about this.
I mean, I certainly would be. It'd be like, did y'all hear what they were saying?
Oh no, I would probably just text. It'll be like, Lando, think of the team. Like, I would just do it every once in a while in conversation.
No, I'd be like, do the right thing when something Lando's comes to advice. Just be like, do the right thing.
Oh, what did they say? They said something about think of team breakfast or something as well. Like, think about how awkward it was. It was just like, what are y'all do? What are these guilt trips? This is so weird. Just such a weird situation. Okay, enough about that, even though I could talk about that forever because it was extremely funny. But let's talk about Red Bull. Let's get back to them because they've had not only vulnerability happen in the middle of the season, which I feel like with their car getting worse, that's one aspect of it. Obviously, we know early in the season, Christian Horner got caught in a lot of unfortunate situations. Apparently, an employee sent around, or there was uncovered some messages, that inappropriate messages that he was sending allegedly an employee. And that kind of blew up. Red Bull did some internal investigations. And what do you know? They were like, everything's fine. And so Christian Horner has remained, but it's led to a lot of weirdness within the team. And then you have the car problems, which the car is getting worse and they haven't been able to figure it out. As I said, Max hasn't won a race since, what was it, June 23rd, I said? Yeah, June 23rd, the Spanish Grand Prix. And that's been a long time for him. He has been doing a pretty good driving job by getting the car into points that it probably doesn't deserve. But you still have a big exodus as well with a lot of people that were in Red Bull and had pretty prominent positions within Red Bull. So Jonathan Wheatley, who was the architect of the 2021 theft in Abu Dhabi, which I'm going to call it that, he's joining the Sauber/Audi team. Rob Marshall, their chief engineering officer, is joining McLaren. Will Courtney is the chief strategist at Red Bull. He's joining McLaren as well. He's going to be their sporting director. And the big one is Adrian Newey. He's going to Aston Martin. Listen to Factory Reset, recent episode we did to talk about him and his brilliance as an engineer and why Aston Martin are paying him so much money. But that's a lot of people, especially top line, like people making big decisions that are leaving Red Bull. Then, on the other hand, you have the way they're handling drivers. So Daniel Ricciardo out suddenly before the Austin Grand Prix, which is really sad because Austin's one of his favorite races. He's out. Liam Lawson is in. And then Checo, it looked like Sergio Perez, they were going to get rid of him. There was so much pressure and talk. And then all of a sudden they gave him a contract extension. But now it seems like he's under still even more pressure. So we don't really know what Red Bull's doing pretty much in every facet of owning and operating a team.
It's like every possible PR thing they could do, they have absolutely botched it and fumbled it along the way. And the Checo one is probably I feel like, yes, everyone says the Daniel Ricciardo one is bad, but I feel like the Checo one is worse because everyone's thinking they're not going to keep him after the season. And then they give him a contract extension. All right, cool. Maybe he's staying. Does he deserve it? Probably not, but he's staying. It's fine. And then there would always be this little like, well, if he doesn't turn around, we have this clause in his contract. And it was like, you're just putting the guy in misery. Checo's not helping himself by having to retire the car 2 races in a row, not doing well, is near the bottom at Silverstone. So then you're like, all right, we're back to this. We get to the summer break. Is Checo going to get replaced? Still no. And you have this little exodus. And I think it just felt awkward because you have this guy that you gave a contract to, but he's also sitting duck. But you don't have a clear replacement because the guy you thought you were going to replace him with, you got rid of him. And now you don't promote Yuki Tsunoda. So now it's like, it doesn't make sense. It just feels like the whole PR angle, especially after what Christian Horner done, just fumbling the bag. Where's their PR person? What are they doing? Are they on vacation? Where are they?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up Yuki Tsunoda too, because so he's part of VCarb or Visa Cash App Red Bull. They're basically tier 2 team. But I almost feel like he's been more consistent than Checo this season. And so there is definitely like, will they promote Yuki? Will they send Checo down? What's going to happen? And then when it was all up in the air, I almost think like Checo was also doing things. I don't want to say this, that he was doing it on purpose, but it almost felt like he stopped caring. Like early in the season, last season especially too, he was always like helping Max get points, getting on podium, like doing very well actually. And then suddenly this season, he just completely dropped off and he hasn't really been in the picture except for like a couple times here and there. So I want to know what's going through his head. Like, does he actually want to stay on Red Bull? Is it just because it's good money and they're like top team? What's happening? Because he also he tweeted that meme from Wolf of Wall Street. Like, I'm not going anywhere. like one heck of a way to say, announce your contract extension. But then also it's like, is it really an extension? Like, you still have to perform and then you get it. Like, it's on. Who knows?
That's the weird thing is he dropped that with no actual improved agreement. Like, you could still be replaced before 2025. But yeah. I think you're right. That kind of speaks to his headspace a bit because I think, one, Max has eaten up every single second driver that he's had. There have been so many of them, and they all end up leaving for a number of different reasons. And it seems like the same is just going to happen eventually with Checo. But I am also just like Christian Horner, so the team principal. He admitted to not taking problems seriously with the car because Checo was complaining about it because Max was still winning. That's wild to just say that in public. Like, we weren't really worried about the car because one of our drivers is winning and the other wasn't. Well, you have a duty to both, do you not? But in Red Bull, they don't. They really are just like, we back Max. I've listened to so many podcasts that are like, some hosts think they don't have the same car. Some hosts think that like Checo is getting like the test car and then Max is getting things once they're perfected. And you also have to drive the car similar in setup to the way Max does, because they're going to put all their energy and focus into prioritizing Max and giving him the kind of car that he wants. But his driving style is pretty particular and not quite the same as Checo. So that could call, like, once the car starts getting weird, it makes a lot of sense why Checo would start struggling and Max would be able to hang on because it's in his comfort. Like, it's in his zone of comfort already. It may be getting a little weird for him, but to Checo, this thing is undrivable.
Well, and the thing with that, like with Christian Horner, it's like, oh yeah, we were winning. I was like, yeah, I mean, Max was winning, but also Checo was still doing very poorly in the second half of last year. So it's not as though it's like it was fine, we don't care, whatever. It was like Checo wasn't doing that great. Like, there are definitely races where Checo got the car into points because generally competence from Mercedes and Ferrari, McLaren not quite being there yet, but it just felt like Max Verstappen alone can win us the Constructors' Championship, so it doesn't matter like what else happens to Checo, and now reaping what you sow, I guess.
Yeah, really good point. Last year they were able to rely on Max, and Max got all the points. I mean, Checo got points too, but Max did the heavy lifting. This time, Max is still doing heavy lifting, but Checo can't help him. And yeah, Red Bull is seeing what happens now when you don't take care of both your drivers. And if you do listen to the factory reset, like we talk about the cars a lot, obviously, and like making a small change will affect the driver a lot. So if they're tailoring a car just to Max, of course Checo's not going to like it. Of course he's not going to be able to drive it the way he wants. So yeah, it's favoritism. It's not great on Red Bull's part.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, they're losing a lot of the people that might be part of the solutions, or at least be tasked with the responsibility of solving these problems. And it seems like a lot of decision makers are leaving, and including the top engineer in the sport, I don't want to get ahead of myself and say like this is the end of Red Bull's dominance, because Max is very good. And by the way, he came in second in Singapore, so it's still not like any other driver besides Lando is consistently beating him. But when you talk about the constructors, that is right. Deeply mentioned, like that's where not having two drivers, not focusing on getting the best from two drivers is now a serious problem for Red Bull. They're already second place in the constructors, which is wild. But when McLaren has Lando and Oscar driving so well, it's hard for just one driver to match that point total. And then you've got Lewis Hamilton and George Russell at Mercedes. You've got Charles Leclerc. Jesus, that's going to take a minute. And Carlos Sainz for Ferrari. And next season isn't going to be any better because you're going to have Lewis Hamilton and Leclerc at Ferrari, right? So and then Carlos Sainz is going to be in a Williams as well, which is going to be wild to see. But I love the move on the surface. And you're just going to have year 3 of this Oscar Lando thing. And that looks like a dominant car with 2 really good young drivers. So I think I want to get into some of the other things that happened because, yes, we focus at the top of the grid, but because the intrigue is there, I think it's fine to talk about that first. If it was just Max winning everything, we would have been like, all right, here are other things that you could pay attention to. But because that changed in the middle of the season, that's been awesome. And you do have a chance for Lando to do something. I believe this would be the biggest point gap ever overcome in an F1 championship season. If he is able to overtake Max, it's going to take a lot of luck, and it's going to take Oscar helping out, as they promised in Hungary that he would. We'll see. But there were some other things that happened. So Logan Sargent is a name you may be familiar with. he got booted. He got bounced. He was not doing too well, and he was crashing his car. And if you crash a car in F1, if you listen to Factory Reset and you hear about the engineering, the money that it takes to come up with these cars, and then when one's crashed, you have to rebuild it. That's not just hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's millions of dollars. That's not good. Yep. You will get the boot after that. So Logan Sargent got the boot.
And Franco Colapinto.
Yeah, so I was going to say, Kyle, you really like Franco and what he's done. So I want you to talk about Franco Colapinto because I think he's been amazing as well.
Honestly, it's surprising because it's not like he was one of these top performers in F2. Like, he was doing pretty solid, but you would think out of the other guys, like, he's doing all right, but he wasn't, setting F2 on fire. It's not like this was one of those guys where it's not a Teo Pourchaire. It's not one of these other ones. So the fact that he just comes in and just crushes it. And I think that's the shocking part as well, was that he just came in and it seemed like there was an improvement. It didn't feel as like, oh, there's some growing pains or anything like that. I was like, oh no, he just came in and immediately started looking more competent than Logan Sargent ever did, getting 12th in Monza, which pretty tough race, and then come back, get 8th and get his first points over in Baku, a very difficult racetrack. And then followed up with Singapore in 11th. He's come in and looked pretty solid, and it's impressive because, with Williams as well, it's not as though if he does well here, he's going to get the Williams seat next year. It's like they already have their 2 drivers. But the fact that you can look and say, all right, this guy can do the job. And this wasn't like a Nick DeVries situation either, where he did well in one race and then automatically got a seat. It's like he's shown in these 3 races, he has the capability. He has the skill to do it. I don't know what's going to happen after this season, but I at least feel encouraged that, he looks like someone that could really be someone that could fill in. We'll talk about like he can fill in a seat, and it's not a gamble. It's not one of those like, why are you doing this kind of moves? Like I said, in F2, he was distant behind the top 6, but he did get a win. He has won in the sprint race, so it's not as though he doesn't have the skill set. But I don't know. If you're a Williams fan, you got to at least be happy that you see another academy driver just come in and do the job that Logan Sargent unfortunately couldn't.
He's quickly becoming one of my favorites just in terms of personality as well. Like, he's got a charm. He's just so, it's hard to put in words. He's so friendly with everyone. He just seems like he's really enjoying it. He's taking this chance that he's gotten and taking it by the reins and just running with it, and like obviously doing well with it too. But yeah, he's going to be a fun character and a fun addition to the grid.
We hope so, because right now he doesn't have a seat next season. True. But it has been great to see. And I do think that, and actually I want to talk to you about this, Kyle, because there aren't that many seats available coming up in 2025. And we do have quite a few rookie drivers hitting the grid this season, but also next season. So Franco Colapinto is one that has stepped in this season, doesn't have a drive for next season. But Franco has been really good. And in one of the toughest races of the year, which I think is the most physically demanding race of the year, the Singapore race, you got walls, you have the extreme heat. Drivers are usually shattered after that one. And he performed well in that race. And it's almost like if you can do well there, you're going to be fine, at other circuits. So it's interesting to see, how far will somebody go to maybe get him in a seat, because he's not going to be at Williams. Their driver lineup is already set next season. So what does he do? And Kyle, you have a couple ideas and a couple of the seats open, because I think this is something else to think about.
Yeah, right now there's technically 2 spots open. So one of them is Visa Cash App Red Bull. Yuki Tsunoda is confirmed to be there for next year. Technically, there isn't a second driver for that. Right now, Liam Lawson is driving in the interim after Red Bull got rid of Daniel Ricciardo. It feels as though as long as Lawson doesn't do terribly, he'll get that seat for next year. And then the other spot is Sauber, the worst team on the track right now. They have Nico Hülkenberg as one. They have him confirmed. We're not sure what they're going to do with that. It seemed as though Carlos Sainz was going to be the one that everyone thought would go there, just because when they shift over to Audi, it makes sense. They haven't made a decision there. Matteo Binotto, who is the team principal, more or less has said oh yeah, we're going to make a decision in the next few weeks. He said that a month ago. He still has not made a decision. So there are options. So I feel like that's probably the best one because Alpine went with the rookie. They promoted their reserve driver in Jack Doohan. Mercedes promoted Kimi Antonelli from their academy. He's going to take over. Haas is going to bring up Ollie Berman, who has done really well. Talk about someone that did well in tough races. He's shown the last 2 times. He's going to get, so yes, we do have an influx of rookies, but so Sauber seems like the one that likely Colapinto can get, but we're not sure what's going to happen. They might go with Valtteri Bottas, who is currently driving there right now. Technically, Joe does have a chance, but it's probably not going to happen. Their reserve driver, Theo Pourchaire, who won the F2 championship last year, and as their reserve driver, he had a stint with the McLaren IndyCar team. That was a weird situation. That's a whole nother episode. I feel like McLaren's IndyCar trials and tribulation. And then there's been reports that Gabriel Bortoleto, who is a McLaren driver who has done really well in F2 this season, could be one. So there's a couple options, but I was going to say Colapinto, if he improves and shows that he can compete with everyone else, maybe he sneaks in and takes that Audi spot. Who knows? But that's the options. Right now, it's down to Sauber, and no one knows what they're doing. And I feel like no one knows when they're going to make a decision.
Hopefully he gets at least a reserve spot. And which do you think he would stay with Williams as a reserve driver, or what team would be good as a reserve place? Because once a driver goes from F2 to F1, they can't go back to Formula 2. So he's stuck now. Like, he's raced in Formula 1. He either needs a seat, needs to be a reserve, or he can't race the next season.
Yeah, unless he would go to like the endurance, the WEC, or kind of the endurance stuff, IndyCar. I could see him being the reserve driver for Williams. The weird part with Williams is because they have that partnership with Mercedes, most of the time they just have a Mercedes driver kind of fill in as the reserve. I know like Red Bull does the same thing where they have just one, like Liam Lawson was the reserve driver for all 4 spots at Red Bull. Ferrari had that similar thing with Haas. So I think if he was going to be a reserve driver, it'd be that Mercedes / Williams spot for next year. Or again, he can do the WEC route on the side as well.
Yeah, I'm fascinated. I love all of these rookies coming in. I just wish there were more spots for them. You know, you mentioned Liam Lawson. There's also the thought that we know Checo, despite his meme posting abilities, he may or may not be there. So is Liam Lawson going to be in that Red Bull seat? Is he next up to be next to Max? Or is he just not ready for that yet? Do they move Tsunoda up there? Or who do they get to replace that? But then maybe that opens up another spot elsewhere. So there's a lot of moving pieces, but there also doesn't, like, timing has to be perfect. It has to be right. And there's also a lot of young drivers that need a chance. And Kyle, you and I were talking before we recorded. Now's probably a really good time to get one of these young drivers in, because every young driver we've seen come in, every rookie driver, like F2 driver that's come in, has looked good. Bar Kimi Antonelli crashing in his first practice. Happens, I suppose. But Red Mercedes feel very good about him. They believe he's going to be like the next big thing. He's just 18, turned 18 this year. So that is a lot to put on him. So maybe you can understand why he, took a corner a bit too hard and slid. But Ollie Behrman, you mentioned he's been great in a Ferrari and he was great in a Haas. I don't know how many drivers on the grid you can say about that, right? That was impressive. Liam Lawson, we saw him fill in as well. He's been impressive when he's gotten a drive. Franco Colapinto, as you've mentioned, but there's so many others. You mentioned Pourchaire, who I really want to see. He's been like killing it in F2 for a while now. He's more than earned a chance. And Bortoleto just did something wild this season in F2. He went from last place to first. Now, there was like some safety car stuff that helped close things up, but still.
A win is a win.
Yeah.
Especially when you're last. Like, that's wild. Like, I watched that race because I was like, there's no way this happened. And yeah, I watched every lap and it did happen. And so I'm interested to see what happens the remainder of this year. I don't think we'll see like too many seats taken because there just aren't that many races left. But there should be a lot of competition for signatures from some of these young drivers. And who knows who might be a familiar face that we don't see on the grid next year. Like, we already know we're not going to see Daniel Ricciardo. Could there be somebody else?
I think one of the reasons why with the rookies is going to be important is with the 2026 regulations coming in, it's probably best now to get your young driver in, get them familiar with the car. So that way, when the wholesale changes come in, it's not as though you're starting from scratch. They're familiar with the car. They're familiar with the idea. I don't want to say like slowly integrate them in, but it's easier to do it now than to try and throw a rookie in 2026 when I feel like no one's going to know what the effects of those regulations are going to be.
Yeah, this is one of those sports where I wish they would be able to expand the grid, but you can only expand it so much, if at all. I know there's some talk of potentially having an 11th team further down the line, but even then, like 22 cars is a lot to have on one track. But it's the same as what we say in like football as well, like expand the league, get more. There's so much talent. You want everyone to have a shot, but there's so few spots, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'm very much a proponent of expanding the grid. I think at least 11 teams. I would even be fine with 12. Put 24 cars on the grid. Let's see what happens, because we've already seen that the young talent is out there. And so get some of these kids in here to drive the car. I call them kids, one's 18. Porsche, I think, is like 21. So, I probably shouldn't call him a kid, but whatever. All right, let's talk about what to look for in these next races. There's only 6 races left, as we mentioned. But we're in the chaos hours. If you're familiar with soccer, like I said, we are soccer nerds. NWSL always has chaos. NWSL After Dark, like we always talk about when things get wild. I feel like we're entering a stretch like that at the end of this season because there are only 6 sprint races throughout the entire season. 3 of them are in these next 6 races. Oh, half of them. So Austin, Texas is the next race that's coming up this weekend. That's also a sprint race. So pay attention for that and listen to our preview, Austin preview, and of course we'll do a review once everything is over that weekend. Then they go to Mexico City, Mexico to drive at that race, and then Sao Paulo, Brazil, which is another sprint race. I love that track, by the way. I like that Brazil track. It's awesome. Las Vegas is next up on the grid or up in the calendar, and then Qatar is the final sprint race, and then Abu Dhabi. So you have a lot of different tracks, different locations, and 3 sprint races to go. So let's see, Kyle, I want to ask you, and well, let's start with Deepti. I want to ask you, in terms of like the big things, Drivers' Championship, Constructors' Championship, I think we talked about it a bit in our season preview or in our Austin preview. This race will tell us a lot about are we going to have a battle for the Drivers' Championship? If Max ends up winning, or if it's 1-2, Max Lando, that's not enough points. Then you only have 5 races left. The math gets a little really bad for Lando. It's already not great, but it gets really bad. So outside of Drivers' Championship and Constructors' Championship, what are some things you're looking for in these final 6 races?
I want to look more towards like outside the top 3 even. Like let's say, forget the podium. We have an idea of who's going to be P1 and 2 for sure, but maybe even top like 3, 4. I want to look to like what we're talking about next year and who gets the spots and who are the remaining 2 open spots. Which drivers do we think can make a move and make their like team principals notice them in these last 6 races? I think it's going to be really important for those drivers in the middle of the pack to show their worth. And I think we'll be able, I'm not sure, like Kyle said, I don't really know when those announcements are going to be made, but I think a sprint race is a really good way to see how quickly a driver can adapt. And then the different types of tracks, Las Vegas being a street race and a night race too, you have different environments. So I feel like maybe even by like Brazil, but definitely by Vegas, we should know who the like full grid is next time. Or at least we should have an idea of which drivers have stood out and are going to take those spots.
Yeah. And Kyle, what do you have? Like I mentioned, like the Drivers' Championship, Constructors' Championship. We'll figure out what all that looks like after Austin. But these next 6 races, besides all of that, what are you looking forward to?
I'm curious to see how the drivers handle, because like Qatar last year was a brutal race. Everyone's talking about it was like Singapore. It was hot. Everyone was feeling terrible. There's questions on should we even be having this race. So I'm curious seeing how a lot of these races, because Austin, it could potentially be hot. Mexico could potentially be hot. Brazil, Vegas at least will be a night race, so it shouldn't. But I'm wondering how the toll on these drivers, because now that this mini break is over, it's like, all right, we're going right to Austin, the Mexico, Brazil. It's going to come quick and fast. There's not going to be a lot of time to recover. And how will some of these drivers handle it? Are we going to see more crashes? Are we going to see more, lapse in judgment kind of thing? So I'm curious on that. And then slight thing with constructors, there's kind of 2 odd battles going on, the battle for 6 and the battle for, so the battle for 6 is between the Visa, Cash App, Red Bull team and Haas. Haas is only 3 points behind. And then in the battle 8th, you have Williams and Alpine, and they're 3 points separate as well. So it's interesting because, getting 6 is, a couple million more that you can get for next year. So I'm curious to see how that will turn out.
Yeah, no, that's a great one, actually. I love that you mentioned those, especially when we talk so much about Colapinto. Like, he could be pretty instrumental in getting enough points to get Williams up the grid a little bit so they can get a bit more money for development the next season. I love those. I'm here for all of that as well. My pick is gonna be, all right, I'm gonna be a little sappy about it, okay? Because I love like emotional sports moments, and we're gonna get some no matter what, because Carlos Sainz is gonna be in his final races with Ferrari. He has been an awesome teammate, I think, with Leclerc. They've been a fun pairing as well. They seem to get along for real, and that's cool. So, but of course, that means he's being replaced by Lewis Hamilton, who will also have his final races with Mercedes. And for a lot of people who got into F1, whether it's Drive to Survive or whatever it's been, Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes have been like synonymous. And I know he's raced for other teams, but a lot of his wins, a lot of his notoriety was built up driving a Mercedes and seeing him drive his final races with Mercedes. I mean, when he won Silverstone in a Mercedes, his home race, that was super emotional and it was cool to see. But we're going to get his last drives with Mercedes before he goes to Ferrari, which is going to be interesting. So yeah, I'm looking for the feels moments, which I think we'll get plenty of.
Lewis Hamilton is even Madam VP, Madam President-to-be's favorite driver. So I want to ask her what she thinks about all of this.
She might be a little busy, but I think
just a little bit.
Just a tad.
Yeah, just trying to, censoring myself.
Save the country,
There it is. Yeah, we'll say that. Okay. I feel like we got a little bit more time. Do we have anything else that we're looking forward to? I know I initially discarded or asked us to discard drivers and constructors, even though I like that you went, Kyle, down to the lower tier of the Constructors Championship and looked at some tight races down there. But I do think even including that, I'm excited to see like what Mercedes and Ferrari are going to do. They both those teams have had drivers win races, but they haven't been able to be consistent. And Mercedes has fallen off. We thought they might be right there with McLaren at one point because they won 3 or 4 races during one stretch, and then they just didn't. So they've fallen off. Ferrari looks great when they're in Italy. So sometimes, or Monaco. And then you don't really know what you're going to get at some other tracks. But Leclerc showed he actually had a good race in Singapore as well. So like you really don't know what's going to happen. So I'm very curious. I think Ferrari said they are bringing an update to their car and it should be their last of the season in Austin. So we'll see what that does. But I'm very curious about those two teams because if they can start taking points off of Max as well, then things get really interesting.
Yeah, I haven't done the math yet, but I think I saw that basically if all goes right, that Lando and Max could be battling it out in Abu Dhabi or like be all nearly on the same points, if not exactly the same.
Flashbacks.
So flashbacks between 2021. But yeah, obviously those are both going to be close. The constructors going to be close. But even if you look at the driver standings, like there are a few different groupings, I'd say. So you obviously have the top 2. But then if you look at like P6, 7, and 8, Lewis, George, and Checo, they're all very close. Like there's 30 points separating Checo and Lewis right now. And so that's like a race driver in the driver standing to look at. Even below 10, 11, and 12, they're all within 2 points of each other between Nico Hülkenberg, Lance Stroll, and Yuki Tsunoda. So there are definite groupings within the driver standings that will be down to the wire in these last 6 races. And every point is going to count, which is why having 3 sprint races as well as the 6 actual ones is exciting.
And Kyle, what about you? One more thing before we get out of here.
Toyota and Haas decided to get into a partnership, and
I love it.
Weird. It's like it felt like a Friday news dump. But I was like, yeah, we're partnering with Toyota. To what extent this is, we're not fully sure. But I mean, they'll still have their engine provided by Ferrari for this season and next season. But how Toyota starts to slowly creep in, we've seen some of these like we saw with Honda kind of getting partnership with Red Bull. We know Ford's going to start getting into the game later on, Audi getting into the game later on. So how does Toyota integrate their way? Or is this just a potential so that Haas can not be broke?
Not just Toyota Gazoo.
Yeah. Whatever that means.
Gazoo Racing, of course. Yeah, I don't know why they named it that. They should rethink it. It's very strange. But it is very interesting that Haas went with that. We might have to do some digging on that and talk about it in a future episode because it is fascinating. I've learned that like some of it has quite a few positives, but it's also going to be like a FrankenHaas car because it's got a Ferrari engine. I think the rear of the car is Ferrari and the chassis is by a company called Dallara, who makes a lot of chassis for other formulas as well. So like they've got a lot of different pieces and manufacturers bolting the car together. I don't know if they plan on streamlining that at some point, but a FrankenHaas is what we're going to get for at least the remainder of this season and maybe next. We'll have
right now, all that was really said is that Toyota Gazoo Racing will provide design, technical, and manufacturing services. Sure.
Yep.
Sure.
All right. That means so many things. So we'll see what that looks. Although I did hear, you will see the TGR, Toyota Gazoo Racing decals. They will be on the car in Austin. So they're at least getting those done. So, okay, fine. Something to look forward to, I guess, if you like looking at things that say Gazoo Racing. All right. I think we are done. That is our season recap. Get ready for the remainder of the season. It's going to be very fun, no matter what angle of the grid you're looking at, the top, the middle, or the bottom. There's plenty to get into. Kyle, thank you so much for joining me on this episode.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Deepti, thank you for joining me as well.
Anytime.
Nice. Howdy and anytime. I love it. Your pleasantries are amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you all for listening. We'll be back with more episodes again. An Austin preview is coming, and then we're going to review that race and see what the hell happened during that and the sprint and all of it. Until then, I guess our sign off is
Vroom, vroom.
Vroom.